Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. As an art advisor, one of the questions I get asked most often from students or even those thinking about a career in the art world, how do I break in? And the truth is, whether you're just starting out or already working in the field, the art world remains incredibly opaque. I think it's for a variety of reasons, including the fact that it's made up of many small and varied employers across the globe. And while we often talk about the lack of transparency in terms of pricing and the market, there's just as much opaqueness when it comes to things like salaries, career paths, and workplace structures. So in this week's episode of the podcast, we wanted to explore these issues further, both from the employee and the employer perspective. So we're joined by Rosie Allan, managing partner at Sophie Macpherson Ltd, the leading recruitment firm specializing in the global art market. Sophie Macpherson also just released the SML Art Market Talent Report 2025 in partnership with ArtTactic, which you can download for free now by visiting arttactic.com. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Rosie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dive into some of the key findings from the report that was just released and really also just hear your thoughts on a range of employment-related topics in the art market. I think this is an area that doesn't get much attention in the art press, but it's incredibly important, of course, for those who work in the trade, but I think even also for anyone curious about just how the art world operates kind of behind the scenes. So right now, the art market, it's experiencing a period of softening. We have major geopolitical uncertainty, whether it's wars, we have shifting economic policies, things like tariffs that can have a direct impact on the art business. How are these factors already shaping hiring practices, compensation, and really broader employment trends across the art world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not immune to all of these bigger, wider issues that are affecting the art market. We tend to find that the hiring landscape follows along. There's a bit of a lag behind what's going on in the wider art market. So when auction results drop, we might see those impacts on the hiring landscape 3 months later. Hiring is still very much active, though approached with greater caution and better planning, I would say. In this climate, it's become something of an employer's market. So there are many candidates, but that doesn't mean that employers can afford to undercut compensation. So we've still seen strong candidates walk away from opportunities due to low offers. Our report presents the median base salaries based on the data we gathered from our surveys. It's clear from the wider commentary that many employees feel underpaid. So employers, particularly those with the capacity to do so, should be mindful of this and aim to meet or exceed market benchmarks in order to attract and retain top talent. We've observed a lot of new ways of working. Many of the employees surveyed, especially those working within smaller businesses, have additional paid work outside of their primary job. And this is a trend that I think will continue. We've had, as a business, increased requests to fill consulting positions that are either project-specific or part-time. And this can work well for the employer, as it fills a specific need, but also for the employee who might appreciate increased flexibility or perhaps the opportunity to try something a bit different, work in a different business type. So there is a lot of opportunity still available despite current market conditions.
And one of the major goals in the report that you just released is to enhance transparency around pay within the art world, which has traditionally been an opaque space when it comes to compensation. In other industries, there's been increasing pressure to share salary information, benefits, opportunities for advancement. From your perspective, where does the art market currently stand in terms of transparency around these issues, and how does it compare to other industries?
Well, I think the art market still lags behind in terms of transparency, but there has been progress. Since the release of our last report, we've seen more businesses express a genuine desire to improve parity and openness around pay and progression, and we've had lots of deep conversations with our clients around this. I don't know about you, but I often speak to friends working in other sectors who talk about pay grades and salaries that are published alongside job opportunities. However, in the art world, while it's now a legal requirement to publish salaries in many states in the US, in the UK and Europe, salary information is often not disclosed publicly. And so that does seem to fall behind other industries. But it's encouraging to see lots of new initiatives and surveys. Just the same week as we published our report last week, AWITA, which is the Association of Women in the Arts, they produced a study pushing the industry forward, helping to foster a more equitable professional landscape. And that's what our report intends to do as well.
And for employees looking to advance in their careers and ultimately increase their income, what strategies or skills do you feel like are most valued in today's art market? And what really are the most lucrative areas of the art world?
I would say that adaptability is important, commercial awareness, digital fluency. These are all increasingly valuable. In terms of the most lucrative areas of the art world, roles in private sales, roles in advisory firms, and leadership positions, of course, within the larger organizations tend to be amongst the most financially rewarding. However, aligning your skill set, network, and career aspirations is the most important thing for long-term success. We have a lot of insights on our website specifically tailored to candidates at different stages of their careers. So people can look to those to sort of explore what skill sets they might need to level up on and what they can do to enhance their profiles to seem more appealing to an employer.
And another finding in the report that I found interesting was the decline in employee satisfaction with salaries. And that was particularly the case in the US and the UK, despite, interestingly, some wage growth in certain areas. At the same time, employers, they're facing challenges in attracting and retaining talent. So what do you feel like is driving this disconnect between pay, satisfaction, and hiring? And what steps ultimately can businesses take to address this?
Wages have risen in some areas. However, these increases are largely offset by inflation, leaving many people feeling no better off. The result is a gap between perception and reality. So people are earning more, but not necessarily living better. And again, this is reported more broadly than in just our sector. Navigating the disconnect is the complexity. And I think, you have to be pragmatic on both sides. Employees need to have a clear understanding of their value, whilst also recognizing the constraints that businesses might face. If a significant salary bump isn't feasible internally, a career move may be the most realistic route, though that in itself may require upskilling or broadening experience. For employers, staying aligned with market rates is essential. Transparency around pay, but also progression pathways can go a long way, even when financial flexibility is limited. So where raises aren't possible, employers could consider offering alternative forms of support, whether that's greater flexibility, more autonomy, security. Non-financial benefits can all meaningfully boost satisfaction and retention.
And looking at broader employment and pay trends in the art world compared to, say, a decade ago, do you feel like there's been any significant shifts, or are we still seeing many of the same patterns? I'm curious whether real progress has been made or if the challenges facing art workers have simply taken new forms.
I think progress has been made. 10 years ago and plus, we were all expected to work unpaid at the start of our careers. And that's no longer the expectation. Starting salaries have increased a huge amount from 10 years ago. And that's where it's most important, removing barriers to entry into the industry are key to encouraging a diverse workforce. And, we really need to bolster the workforce coming in. to our industry, and that's the best way to do that. I find that there's a lot more professionalism in the art world. I mean, I've been working in recruitment for 10 plus years in the art world, so I've definitely seen a lot of progress in that time. There's an awareness of inequality. There's the growing call for transparency. We are still faced with challenges. There is pay disparity, as our report highlights. The career paths are not always clear and easy to identify. And we definitely still see some instances of limited upward mobility. These are the kinds of concerns we hear from candidates working in the market. But I think there is, there's more professionalism. There's more data-driven discussions as well. I mean, ours is not the only report out there. There are lots of people talking about insights, looking at the data. There's a stronger push for reform from organizations. So there is a meaningful shift. It's just perhaps quite slow in many senses.
It's interesting. You mentioned unpaid work earlier in your answer, and it struck a chord with me. I remember entering the art world in 2008 in the midst of the global recession, when most art businesses, they were only offering unpaid internships. I remember I had 2 of them simultaneously for a while before I landed my first job. It was a tough time. Many of my peers who were also starting out, they ultimately left the industry because they needed paid work elsewhere and just unfortunately never found their way back, even though art was their passion. Thankfully, we've made progress since then, with most internships now being paid, and I assume far few people are working for free as a result. With that in mind, I'm curious, are there any other key highlights from this year's report that we haven't touched on yet in our conversation that you think are especially important to share?
Well, I mean, I think one of the interesting things, I suppose it's hard for me to be surprised by too many of the findings in the report because I'm so close to it, but I think a lot of people have asked about things like flexibility, working on site or working remotely. Of course, art is best viewed in person. So naturally in our industry, there's going to be, a lot more on site or in office work. And our report did find that specifically with galleries, of course, because you need to be able to see the art. But that does actually mirror what we see in other sectors. So we're not necessarily out of step with other industries in that sense. Not a lot of remote working opportunities. And I think that's, more prolific in the UK and Europe. We found that we did 2 surveys. So we did our first survey at the beginning of 2024, and the view with that was to look back on 2023. And then we did our second survey at the end of 2024, with the view that would be reporting on that year. And our findings, our survey found that negative hiring perceptions had improved, dropping from 36 to 25. It's hard for us to report on what's happening in this year and what's going to happen ahead. And we have to look to the wider market for that. But certainly there are grass shoots of opportunity becoming available as things lift, as things look up in 2025, and as planning for the year ahead really gets underway now that we're drawing to the end of the first quarter of this year.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those. Those are really interesting. So one of the most common questions I get as an art advisor is from students interested in a career in the arts. Many of them are passionate, but really unsure of where to start or how to build a path forward. Given your role at Sophie Macpherson, where you're regularly interacting with employers and helping them find the right candidates, I feel like you're in a really unique position to understand what they're looking for. What advice would you give to young professionals trying to enter and navigate the art world today? Are there particular roles, skills, or approaches, or any type of advice that tend to open more doors early on?
Be proactive, be informed, do your research, and stay open-minded. These are things that I always suggest. I think the art world is very relationship driven, so networking, work experience are really important. There are lots of opportunities for collaboration in the art world, so leaning into those. There are lots of opportunities to, learn from one another, mentoring others, gaining experience across different types of organizations. Our industry is small but very dynamic. So if you can gain some experience in the commercial sector, in a museum, in a nonprofit, it can not only help you discover where your strengths lie and what the best fit is for you, but it also can set you up to contribute more dynamically. I think staying curious is important. Things change quickly in the art world, and markets shift, attentions shift. So I think the most successful professionals in this field are those who combine that knowledge with an adaptability and also a genuine passion, right? Because we work for an industry that involves art and artists, and you have to be able to prove that passion and continue, to learn and absorb throughout your career. Again, we have resources on our website that particularly guide early career staff into, here's how to get ahead, here's what to do. So please do have a look at our website as well.
Rosie, thanks so much again for coming onto the podcast and answering some questions regarding the recently released SML Art Market Talent Report, which anyone can download now for free, as well as really just sharing your valuable perspective on employment trends, as well as your advice. It's a really underreported area of the art world, so we really appreciate it. And if our listeners want to learn more about some of the resources and opportunities available at Sophie Macpherson, as well as just stay up to date with job listings and follow you on social media, how can they do all of that?
Yeah, it's sophiemacpherson.com is our website, and the talent report can be found there alongside all of our insights, which I've mentioned. We have a lot of activity on LinkedIn and also on Instagram.
Perfect. Thanks so much again, Rosie. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Adam.